and it's led to him meeting his future wife, and they're working together in Brazil, and they're providing these retreats based on some of these principles and this process that Sean has been trained in, and is working and using innovative practices to help people from all around the world. And I was hoping that many people from different backgrounds and fields would be interested in this work. That's why I wanted to bring Sean to do a presentation, along with Kirsten as well, if that's okay with her, in terms of experiencing this process and what it was like attending the retreats with Sean. And also if Sean's wife wanted to say a few words as well, or Sean, Kirsten, or anybody else, that's fine. And lastly, I'm just wondering, is it okay with everyone to record the meeting? If that's okay with everyone.
Can I ask, is it okay if we record this meeting? It's looking good.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll leave it to Sean, if that's okay with everyone.
All right, thank you. And Sean, what kind of structure would you like this evening?
Yeah, we need a little bit of focus. So my presentation I've got here, I've got some PowerPoint slides for you guys. I'm planning to talk about 30 minutes. So I thought we'd go 15 minutes, and then there's a break where I could sort of open things up to questions. And then we get into the second half of the work. And then when we close it out, then we can just have the rest of the questions, open discussion, you know, so for the back half of the meeting. If that sounds fine with everybody? Okay. All right. So I guess I'll just get into it, right? And you should also know Kirsten Ogard was a client of mine at one of my retreats, 2 of my retreats actually. So she'll be jumping in after the presentation's over. So Kirsten, you can relax while the PowerPoint slides are up. And the first thing I'll share though, let's see, let me get my slides up. Share screen. Sharing screen. So now I hope you guys see my screen, and then you can see this PowerPoint. And does that look okay for everybody? Can you see that book? I didn't mean to have my book up front, but Natalie, does everything look good?
It's I can do the reading.
You can do the reading. Oh, and then but I've got these heads over here. I don't know what I'm going to do with these heads because I kind of want to see them. I think I'll put them over here for now while I talk, okay? That looks good down there, okay. Okay, so, okay, I'll just get started here. This is the first time I've ever done a Zoom meeting like this, so I'm excited, I'm a little bit nervous. Let's see how it goes. And if there's a real technical problem, please, somebody tell me that there's a problem, okay? Leisha, come out of the kitchen, whatever it takes, you know. So anyways, we're talking about basically an adventure of mine for the last 6 or 7 years, the Bipolar Awakenings Healing Retreat. My company is bipolarawakenings.com, all right? And just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give you a bit of the background on this, how it came to be. We're going to talk about the retreat methodology, the techniques for liberating trauma, basically breath work. This meeting was introduced as bipolar breathwork. We're going to get into that. There's going to be a break for questions. Then we'll go into a discovery I had related to this work, some of the results we've had, more discoveries and innovations, which I think you'll all find quite interesting, and then more questions. So that's how we'll roll, all right? So the first thing, little background. Together with my wife, Leisha, who's a transpersonal psychologist, we've been studying the relationship between the concept of spiritual emergency and bipolar disorder since 2007. And Leisha, if you just want to say hi to everybody, Leisha's been involved in the peer support movement down here in Brazil. She's really a founder of the peer support culture down here in Brazil. If you just want to say hi for a second.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I really in touch with all these people here. I don't know, following the work that we know at this moment in the world is the most important thing we can do. So thank you very much for everybody.
Yeah. And one thing with Lisia's peer support, she's been very much connected with Katie Mottram and the Emerging Proud movement of the UK, and sort of bringing that and having a representation of that here in Brazil. So we've been at that since 2007. And there's a history there that it's just too long to get into. It's just what we're doing, okay? And that's when I started my YouTube channel, which is Bipolar or Waking Up. I started that in 2007. And I spoke with hundreds of people online who basically had had spiritual experiences and received psychiatric diagnosis, because, you know, I'd had a spiritual experience that I got hospitalized for in 1997, and it was just about the best thing that ever happened to me. So I wanted to know what was the difference between what happened to me, which had been so beneficial, and yet they were diagnosing as a disorder, and this thing that was mental disorder that was happening actually to my family members, a couple of our nieces who were being medicated for life. And so I wanted to see this difference between my breakthrough and what was happening, okay? My first video in 2007, I was asking sort of a rhetorical question, am I bipolar or waking up? To get people to kind of give me some responses about their experiences in being diagnosed, the kind of sensory experiences, experiential experiences they're having in their, you know, so-called acute psychosis, okay? And my YouTube channel was called Bipolar or Waking Up, started in 2007, right? So why bipolar? I know there's a lot of people probably associated with this group who are quite sensitive about labels and things like this, but it's important to remember that even though there is a stigma around the bipolar, that by Google searching bipolar, you get 89 million results. And if I wanted to use a more positive interpretation, for example, what I'd considered my own spiritual emergency, I need to move my little guy here, you know, 97,000 results, which is, you know, a lot less. And personally, what I was really going for was finding this little niche, bipolar spiritual. So all my videos have these words in it, bipolar spiritual. And of course, it's a much smaller niche, but many of the people who have found my work have come through looking up that on Google, looking for a spiritual mention of bipolar, something about spiritual experiences and mental disorders, some sort of crossover. And I know that Natalie's done a fair amount of work on that as well. Now, what I was doing was I was comparing the experiences of people online with the theories of pioneering psychologists and psychiatrists like Dr. Stanislav Grof and Dr. David Lukoff. Hide thumbnail video. Okay, I'm just going to hide this for now so you guys can see the rest. And also, you know, these are transpersonal psychologists. Dr. Lauren Mosher from the Soteria House Project, I'm sure many of you are aware of. Dr. John Weir Perry with his Diabasis Project. And what they were doing at these two clinics was working with people without medication and helping them work through their processes. And I'm sure many of you are aware. And if I'm moving a little too quickly for people, what I've also got is I've got an attachment I can give you related to links, okay? And these links are going to take you to some videos, which you can watch later, or other links that explain, for example, Soteria House, okay? And a few other things. But I'll add these later because I think things will get complicated now that I'm sort of in the flow. So I'll provide these links later. If you're feeling a little lost about something, the videos on the links should be able to help. Okay, so I looked at, you know, other psychologists as well. And then I made a lot of videos on my channel. Videos touching on subjects like hallucinations, suicide, depression, the spiritual awakening side, why people think they're Jesus, if you can see that down there in the third row. A wide variety of topics, all related to the healing potential, the spiritual dimension and healing potential of what's commonly referred to as the bipolar disorder. That's what I called it, okay? So with that, I had over 60 videos in English up, over 3 million views, and many of my videos have been translated into up to 6 languages, depending on the video, okay? Many of them are in German and Romanian, and then Spanish, French, a few others, okay? Then in 2011, I wrote my book, published my book, Am I Bipolar or Waking Up? It's available on my website as a free PDF for anybody who wants to learn more about my story, because in 1997 I was hospitalized. It was a short hospitalization, only 4 days, but you know, I did take all my clothes off. I was in a hotel ballroom. I pissed on the floor. I thought I died. And when the police came, I thought they were taking me to heaven. So I was into the so-called psychosis that people talk about, for sure, right? I think this might work. Maybe it's a little bit better to show it like this. Okay. Is that okay? Yeah?
John, you are using not the whole screen. Maybe you can use the whole.
Better? Yeah, you think it's better to just go here?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. Okay. Thanks for the tip. All right. So, but can you see all the text here, Leisha? Or does it cover? It's okay? Okay. All right. So I'm moving this wherever I want to move it. Okay, great. So back to the work. While I was making these videos between 2007 and 2009, we had an opportunity to work with 5 different people in states of mania or psychosis, unmedicated, very much in the Soteria model. That's what we were after. We were trying to sort of imitate a Soteria house model, but in a very impromptu way, like someone would call us and we would just go and find a house to support them in and try and, you know, do the best we could, you know, this sort of thing. But with where we were in Brazil, without the government support or anything like that, you know, we had some success, but actually the model, the Soteria model for us, proved to be very chaotic. It was very confrontational with the families and obviously with psychiatry. And therefore we found it very unsustainable, you know, because at the very least, if you're going to have a clinic, you need to have some relationship with psychiatry in order to get patients. And we just couldn't get there. So we realized that for us, the Soteria model wasn't going to work. Okay, and that was painful, right? But so we decided to create a different thing, okay? And this was really, you know, after some struggle with a few years of different models. And we came up with an intensive personalized retreat, ideally of 10 days, with a structured and focused format for going deep into healing work with people who are in a grounded state, okay? So we weren't working with people in psychosis. We were working with people once they got back, had their feet on the ground, and most of the time they were medicated, almost all the time. You know? For this, we needed a safe location away from the city where the neighbors wouldn't be bothered by noise. And each client needed to have a trusted supporter, someone that could be a link with the family so that they didn't think, well, where's our bipolar son? He's gone off with this guy on the internet. We had to have a link back to the family and friends so that they knew that they were safe with me. And this supporter needed to be involved before the retreat began, during and after, during the integration phase, okay? So they were there the whole way. They were sort of invested in this person's healing. Okay, pre-retreat, what we did was we gave people a questionnaire, and I can send people the questionnaire if you're interested. I've got it here, to better understand the nature of the client's experience and to screen for suitability for the retreat. Ideally, I was looking for people that did have a bit of a spiritual experience in their profile, because our research had indicated that if people were, you know, very fearful, for example, and untrusting of others, that our retreat wouldn't be so helpful and they'd be wasting their money, you know. So we wanted to see people who did have a spiritual side, who believed in my work, who'd seen the videos, who really identified with the videos, and were really determined to heal. You know, this was an important thing. And with that, you know, we provided a psychoeducational phase, which involved studying the videos more closely and doing some reading into mainly Dr. Stanislav Grof's work. And then we would have a series of online consultations to build relationship and make sure that they were prepared, make sure their supporter was prepared to come with them and do the retreat. Okay. Now, our approach, and this was, I think, quite different than from Soteria House. We recognized over time that there was a place really at the table for everybody that was involved, that was needed and necessary and helpful. The peer support movement, you know, Leisha's been involved in that. We've been to the peer support meetings in the United States, And clearly, you know, that was an important part of this. And we're going to talk about each of these parts a little bit more detail. Psychology, spirituality, and psychiatry all came to play a role. And I'll be using these colors, green for peer support, red for psychology, blue for spirituality, and gold for psychiatry as we go through the presentation, so you can have a better idea of where things fit in, you know. So, and we also had an agreement, okay, and this is the first place you'll see those colors. So the Bipolar Awakenings Healing Agreement explained the set and setting of the retreat, basically rules for safety and protection of the client while they're on the process, clarifies the responsibilities, the client, the facilitator, that's me, and any supporters that come along, who are usually voluntary, although they can be paid as well. We've got paid people that can do that. And there, here's where the peer support comes in. While it's my role as the facilitator to protect, lead, and coach during the retreat process, the client really had complete say over the timing and duration of the retreat activities and what activities we're doing. So nothing went ahead without their consent. That was the first thing. And the second was that the peer was really there primarily as emotional support, which I think is the most valuable part of the peer support process, is having someone there who's just sort of in your corner, on your side all the time. Right? There was explanations in the client agreement regarding physical contact for protection and therapeutic purposes, because sometimes as a facilitator, I need to jump in and protect somebody in a strong experience, or they might want physical contact if they're going through something that needs particular assistance. And I'll talk a bit about that a little bit later. And then finally, the client agreed to remain on the current level of medication for at least a month after the retreat. So if they weren't medicated, that was fine. They could come unmedicated, no problem. But if they were on a particular level, I wanted them to stay there, because there was always a risk if they went off the meds before they came to see me that they would have an episode, a manic episode, because my clients have bipolar disorder, and then they would have to forfeit their entire retreat. You know, they've made financial investments, I've made financial sacrifices, and then all this sudden they go into a manic episode and they can't come. It's a real disaster on both sides. So I would insist that that happen, that they remain on their meds. And so that's the psychiatric part. And payments and refunds regarding to the client agreement, how that would work. Okay, so that was all there, explained up front. It took a while to develop this. It took about 6 or 7 retreats before I really had this client agreement in place. And even now, I'm still revising it with every retreat. Now, our work had an underlying assumption and it started with Groff's work, but the research has really been done by a couple of guys out of the UK. I think John Reed's from New Zealand, but he's in the UK a lot. Dr. Richard Benthall, I'm sure a lot of you guys know him. And they were studying trauma, you know. And our belief was that when it came to disorders, especially bipolar disorder, to heal a disorder, the underlying trauma needs to be released. That's it. And that's what we were going for. And just to, you know, redefine, trauma is not a difficult experience. We all have all kinds of difficult experiences in life. Trauma is the emotional dimension of an experience which has not been expressed. Something happens to you that is just so difficult or horrifying that part of it gets blocked off and it's in your unconscious. And that's where it goes, okay? But with that, from a biological perspective, where's the trauma? You know, it's not a question that people ask very often, but you know, people know they're traumatized. Many psychologists talk about being traumatized, but where exactly is that trauma? You know, you can't find it. And that's the thing, is that we needed a new paradigm, because the medical model, seeing us as muscle and bones and all that stuff, you cannot find trauma in that model. You can't, there's no PET scan, there's no MRI. And the same way there's no PET scan, there's no MRI for any so-called mental disorder. They don't exist. So we had, however, something different. We had the transpersonal model, this is art by Alex Gray, but it's an analogy of what we feel is going on that we cannot measure with science, okay? It's a bioenergetic system that goes through our whole bodies. Okay, so in Dr. Stan Groff's theory of transpersonal psychology, trauma is held in blockages in the bioenergetic system, and we need a safe, emotionally supportive environment in order to access this system, okay? Because there are ways to access it. It just needs to be done very safely. And that's why the retreat format was ideal. So this underlies everything we do. If someone comes to work with me, we're going to work on the trauma, period. You know, if someone has a different idea about how they want to heal or something like that, they're in the wrong place. We're focused. We've got 10 days. We've got work to do, you know? Okay, so what's the technique for liberating the trauma? Yes, Leisha.
Just jumping in because you pointed out the colors and then you had the red there to point out the color of psychology that you're mentioning. And before you had the yellow to point out the psychiatry that you're mentioning, the integral approach.
Right. Yeah, it was the green with the peer support, the yellow with the psychiatry, and now it's the red with the psychology. Thanks for the reminder. So this is why I brought my wife. You know, she's always got my back. And so the healing technique, we call it bipolar breathwork, but it's rooted in holotropic breathwork. So let me just explain a little bit about holotropic breathwork. I'm sure some people here are familiar with the concept, others aren't. But, and so I think I'll show a little video around that. But the basic idea of holotropic breathwork, it was created by Stan and Christina Grof in the 1970s. It's a technique for liberating trauma using voluntary over-breathing. And holotropic means moving in the direction of wholeness. The client is invited to express their inner experience without any sort of repression in a protective setting with powerful music being played, all right? And this technique has a capacity to release physical tension, which is a big part of bipolar disorder, is holding tension, life trauma, childhood trauma, of course, perinatal trauma, trauma happening in the birth process is a very important part of this work and is a big part of Grof's contribution to psychology. Repressed emotions like anger, sadness, fear, and joy. Sexual repression can come up too. And spiritual energies or encounters of a divine or demonic nature. You know, these things can all happen when you're in what Grof will call a holotropic state. You know, you're in that place where you're moving towards wholeness, okay? And, but how's this happening? Well, you can get the impression that this is happening because you're breathing, but that's not quite it. The breathing is opening you up. It's kind of breaking your ego down like psychedelics do. The breathing could do the same thing, but the healing is coming from a healing agent that Stan Grof would refer to as the inner healer, a divine loving intelligence, okay? And the facilitator is there, and we've been trained. I was trained with Grof Transpersonal Training to help the client surrender and flow with this sacred process. That's what's going on, all right? So because this is a little bit new, I'm sure for a few people, I've got a 1-minute video to show you guys how holotropic breathwork can go, all right? Now there's music with this that you probably can't hear on your end, unless you're hearing it from my computer. And you can see people getting into some breathing here, pretty strong, aggressive breathing. And then a wide variety of experiences can happen. Involuntary tremors can start to unfold in people. People can start to sort of just go with the music, go with the flow. It can be just very enjoyable. There can be some body work. You might want a hand on you or something like this. This woman here is going into a process releasing some of her asthma condition. Here, more physical tension being released by a guy. This is all the introduction of a video from Germany. Again, here more body work needed on the sacrum of this woman to help release the energy, and here in her jaw. You know, so we're trained for this physical body work. Here's a sexual experience that's starting to unfold. And this could be for men or women. A wide variety of experiences can happen. The body will ask me stretch sometimes, and then peace. And people can ask for physical contact or hugs. And then they do mandalas at the end to sort of express their experience. Okay? Okay, and everybody survives. Okay, that's sort of the end. Everybody survives. So I wish I could sort of, you know, talk to everybody and get a feel for the room, but I can't because of the Zoom context. So let's just go back to the presentation here for a second and see where we're at. So this technique has a lot of potential have to move my people around again. Huh. Okay, it has a lot of potential to help people and release deep trauma at the root of disorders, but it's contraindicated for people with bipolar disorder and other, quote, serious disorders. The majority of facilitators will not work with people with so-called disorders. And the reason is that holotropic breathwork is usually done in a group setting, and there is the risk of projection. And that means that if something comes up in you that's so frightening that you don't internalize that process, but you start to project it on the world around you, almost like a paranoia or something. And you might get up off the mat and, you know, you're in a room full of people like you saw in that video, and you might try and step on other people, or you might start yelling and screaming and talking and disturbing other people, particularly through talking or confronting the facilitator. So a safer space needs to be available for people to go into this work than a group setting. You also might need extended time period. The typical Groff facility, the Groff breathwork is 3 hours. You could need much more time than that, you know, so that's why people won't work with people with disorders, you know. But we had a plan. We said to ourselves, well, what if we took the holotropic breathwork for people with bipolar disorder, modified it? So with that, holotropic is a trademark name. So I just started referring to what I was doing as bipolar breathwork in order to give space for adaptation and innovation. And so what that meant was that it would always be done direct one-on-one with the facilitator and the supporter, not in a group. We always allowed clients to stop the process whenever they wanted. We never pushed them to go more than 3 hours. Usually they would go an hour and a half. We had more mattresses and protection space than what you saw in the video. We wanted to give people lots of room and lots of space to really get wild. And this way, bipolar breathwork could be done almost every day of the retreat, and we've encountered only minor problems. And you need to understand that Groff facilitators are trained in weekly modules, 8 weekly modules with a certification at the end. Each breathwork facilitator will do 2 3-hour breathwork sessions in a week for themselves per module. When I tell them that we're taking a group with people with bipolar disorder who are contraindicated and doing breathwork with them every day of a 10-day retreat, their jaws drop. They just can't believe that this is happening. So this is a huge difference, okay, between bipolar breathwork and holotropic breathwork. And, you know, for people who could afford it, this was the house. It's a hotel we have in Brazil. Big, beautiful estate house with 20 rooms, or room for 20 people. The owners are Groff certified facilitators. And we do the work there when people have the finances to afford to stay there. It's actually very cheap. You know, we charge $250 per day to stay at the hotel, and you get the entire hotel. I mean, you couldn't find a deal like that in Europe or in the United States. It's only because they're Groff facilitators, and we've got a special arrangement that can happen. You know, and these people, the Groff people, they do groups of holotropic breathwork at this facility, and we use their private facility. It's perhaps the only one in Latin America like this. And you can see we have, like, in this picture here, I think we've probably got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 mattresses for one person with a whole bunch of pillows. And normally we have laid out more. We'll probably lay out another 5 or 6 mattresses so that the person who's working through the process really has ample space. And most of the time, we've got 3 facilitators with us at the same time, myself and 2 others. You know, if the finances are there, another man and another woman. You know, it's always the other supporter or facilitator should be a woman. And when the client is a woman, it has to be a woman, because often issues related to sex abuse will come up, or other issues related to male abuse, and we have to have a female facilitator there, particularly for the women. Okay, so, and we do other activities that you've already seen the mandala drawing. You know, this is 9 mandalas drawn from 9 different breathwork sessions from one client in Seattle. I've traveled for this work quite a bit, as you'll find out. We do meditation as well, talk therapy, and leisure activities like nature walks and swimming if we've got the capacity. The house we have here in Brazil has swimming pool, you know. But the heart of the whole thing is the breath work. Right? You know, we used to balance it out with other activities, and then we realized that it was really about doing as much breath work as the client could handle. That's where the real deep healing was happening. Okay, so going back, you've seen, you know, the peer support side of this with the supporter, the psychology with the theory, the spirituality with the inner healer, the healing field. It's really the spiritual dimension that's doing the healing work, and it's a sacred process that needs to be respected. And then psychiatry, which gets people in a grounded state so they can come and do the work, and it helps them with integration afterwards, which we haven't talked about yet. So all four aspects are represented. And I think that it isn't just a compromise, it's really needed to do the work we're doing. And it helps make things go a lot smoother as well, sort of on the political front with family. You know, many people will say, well, as long as she's not going off her meds, I guess it's okay. And she's going with her friend, I guess it'll be okay. You know, that kind of thing. So it helps a lot to smooth things over, even with the psychiatrist. Okay, so now I thought I'd open it up for some questions before we move on. Does anybody have anything that they want to discuss or talk about at this point?
If you have any questions, do unmute yourself to ask the question.
Hi, Sean. I'm Jordana.
Hi.
I just have a question. When you say that it's one-on-one, is it the whole retreat is one-on-one, or just the breathwork sessions that you do with the client? Do you understand what I'm asking? Like,
Sure. It's one-on-one. The reason I have a supporter there and perhaps other facilitators is that I do need a lot of private time as well, because we're together 24 hours a day. And I need to bring a certain intensity and focus to the breathwork process, to the meditations, leading everything. So in terms of therapeutic hours in a day, it's usually about 7 or 8 therapeutic hours in a day, including everything, the breathwork, talk therapy, mandala drawing, and everything, about 7 or 8 therapeutic hours. And then we're together, though, usually 12 to 14 hours a day, usually about 12 or 13 hours, because we're eating every meal together, you know. And then there's conversation around these things. So it's a pretty long day together. Usually we're getting up around 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. and then we're going to bed around 9 p.m. because it's just so intense, you know. But in those times when I'm not with the client, especially after breathwork sessions, their supporter is sort of expected to be with them, take care of them, you know. And sometimes the supporters don't really need to be in the room for the breath work. Depends on the number of people we have. Depends. Sometimes there's as many as 4 people on the retreat. There can be, or 5. There could be me, the client supporter, and 2 other facilitators, you know, so 5. In that case, maybe the supporter wants to take a break, you know, that kind of thing. Okay?
great. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
Sean, there's John Mason has a question for you.
shoot. Hi, John.
Hi.
Unmute.
Yeah, it was the one I wrote. If someone is perhaps, how do you say, struggling to feel safe or grounded in the session or during their maybe any processes that come up, I was just wondering if you have any approaches that help to keep it feeling safe, feeling how to say.
No, I understand. I've
Yeah.
got it.
Thanks.
Now, the first thing we're doing is we're asking for a detailed questionnaire. I want to know everything about this person's history and the nature of their episodes and things like that, because we don't have time to get into the kind of criteria that I could, but I want to make sure that this person is feeling somewhat safe with me even before we start. Because it's a big investment and it's a lot of intimacy to be with someone you've never met before for 10 days. And if they're the kind of person who has really deep trust issues with everybody from the very beginning, this retreat is not right for them. What would be better would be to have, you know, weekly therapy sessions to build trust with them for weeks and weeks until we get them to a point where they could do a retreat. But obviously, if I'm working with people in different parts of the world, I can't really do that, you know. Now, so we're screening people to make sure that we think that this would be a person that would feel safe in our retreat environment for the most part. If we think there's an issue around safety, or they tell us they're not feeling safe, we start to modify the approach a little bit. We slow things down. Bipolar breathwork, like holotropic breathwork, can be quite an aggressive approach in terms of playing strong music, strong drumming, and encouraging people to really get into some really deep territory. And instead, what we'll do is we'll create what we call a safe space. And we'll just have the mattresses and blankets, the facilitators, and we'll ask people to position the pillows and blankets and themselves and us in a way that makes them feel safe. We'll put on some relaxing music if you want, and we'll just sit there. We'll just sit there with them for as long as they want. Could be 2 hours, could be 3 hours, apparently doing nothing. But in that process, people start to open up, you know. And the healing field, this inner healer, can start to come into the process as well, you know. So we've seen people go into healing processes, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in the second part, but they'll go into healing processes just sitting there with all of us being safe, feeling safe, and most importantly, leaving space for genuine emotional connection. Because if the connection's not there, no healing's gonna happen. So, you know, that's why, you know, that safe space is really important, you know. So great question, thanks for asking. Is that clear?
Sean,
Thank you.
maybe if you have just a second to clarify about the price. You mentioned the price just for the hotel, I believe, right?
Oh, about the price of the retreat on the whole?
Yeah, because you gave the idea of the price, but that's only for the hotel?
Okay. Yeah, it can be, you know, I'll confess, it can be expensive, and this is a challenge, you know, and this is why I'm still working on this. But I would describe it on a budget. If people came here for 7 days, once you include flights and hotel and my fee and everything, it can be about $7,000 for 10 days, you know, $700 a day. It's quite a lot. And if you get the sort of full package, it can be up to $1,000 a day. Now, this is very reasonable when you look at private clinics and things like that. You know, we're talking about, you know, hiring as many as 3 people for the situation, you know. When I've been able to go to Europe, we've been able to make it a little bit cheaper, you know, but still, it's usually going to be at least $5,000, $500 a day to make this happen for people. And so in Brazil, we do shorter retreats because people are here. 5-day retreats, we do it in a very bare bones way, and we get it down a lot cheaper sometimes. You know, we had a guy here from Texas who I think he was able to put together for $4,000 for 7 days, and that was like, you know, everybody cooking their own meals, you know, that kind of thing, making their own beds, in that sort of situation. So, you know, we can try and make things work. But it's expensive, I think, especially when people have lost their jobs and they're on limited or fixed income, these kind of things. And that's why, you know, that's been a challenge, okay?
Hi, Sean. Sorry, can I, hi, Sean.
Hi.
I mean, could the same process, the sort of meditation process that you're running at these retreats, could they be applied in a virtual space, like what we're doing now in the comfort of your own home, looking sort of into the future with now we've got this sort of technology, you can do this similar process in the comfort of your own home, perhaps? I don't know.
Craig, you're spoiling my surprise ending. Come on. God damn it.
Sorry.
Cut to the chase.
Sorry.
Talk about cut to the chase. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm getting there.
Sorry.
But something's coming. Okay, we're working on something. I'm going to explain it in the second half of the session. So is there another question, or should I get back to it?
Sean, you've got another 12 minutes before we close. So how do you want to manage that time?
I want to cut to the chase. I want to get to what we're doing, you know. So is Zoom going to close? Are we going to be cut off by Zoom?
I think you can re-log back in if you...
Okay, well, we might have to have a relog for people who have other questions. I can stick around, okay? But let's get back to the presentation.
But I can't. So
Okay.
if you're concise about what you're saying, so that we can hear other people's perspectives and answer their questions, I think that's quite important as well.
Okay, I can do my best. I can do my best, yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Okay.
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
I'm a psychiatrist in Brighton, and I've got some experience with holotropic breathwork, so I kind of know a little bit about it. Have you just? I mean, so mainly it's a quick thing, really. Have you seen any qualitative difference in the experience of people with bipolar disorder compared to, you know, people who don't have that kind of mental health problem? With holotropic breathwork, is there anything that's kind of?
Yeah, and it's a surprise. It's a surprise. The people with bipolar disorder on the whole, I've worked with people who, you know, they've usually got longer than a 5-year history, multiple hospitalizations. People like Kirsten was multiple times, you know. They don't express themselves very much on the breathwork mat. They're quite reserved about the whole thing. And it takes a while, and sometimes it takes an entire retreat. It seems that bioenergetically they're numb, especially with schizoaffective. They're numb, and then and so it takes a while to get their system back online. Then when we get people back for a second retreat, they're much more expressive. They've got the experience, but emotionally they're just much more spontaneous and out there. You know?
And is there any sort of effect of medication with that numbness and lack of expression?
Considering that they're staying on their meds for the second retreat, I think it's been okay. You know, it's been. I haven't had a problem. Yeah. It's something I can work with. I'm not even worried about it anymore. We just go. You know. But I should get to some important points. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
I just wondered if the medication contributes to any of that sort of closed in or numbness and limits some people.
But I get the feeling the issue is bioenergetic and not chemical. I think it's part of being emotionally shut down for your entire life, not being able to be your true self in a family environment, things like that. You know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I should keep going. I'm going to be very fast. I try. Okay. This is the discovery we had. We had a discovery. Okay, which is most clients can't do more than 20 hours of breath work across 10 days. And I'm sure Graham would be shocked that they can even do that, because when you're a facilitator in training, you only do 6 hours in a week, right? But the facilitator and supporters may absorb energy from the client, which can lead to exhaustion. I was regularly inundated with nightmares. If the clients were going through anger, I was having nightmares full of anger. If it was fear, I was having nightmares full of fear. Long rest periods were needed to recover, because after 4 or 5 days, I would feel like I was covered in charcoal, all right? So, but we had a solution. Together with my second client, who became a supporter for many people, many other clients, Monica Kettler, we discovered that by doing breath work with the client, we could accelerate the healing process of the client. In other words, we could breathe the client's material. And this is Groff heresy, almost to the point of, this is just wrong, according to, you know, the work of Stan Groff, who's like the guru of this whole thing, you know. But we started calling this approach surrogate breathwork, okay? So in the bipolar breathwork, we started adding an additional person to breathe with the client or immediately after the client, and we called that the surrogate breather. Now the surrogate breath worker is a standard part of all the retreats. Usually I'm the surrogate, and I hire another facilitator when I have the chance. It represents a significant step forward from Groff's holotropic breathwork principles. The inner healer is actually a healing field, and it appears that even people with limited experience with breathwork are capable of working through powerful energies on behalf of someone that they care for. In my last retreat, we had a girl from Canada here with her boyfriend, and she started to go through his birth process. It was his retreat. She went through his birth process, and she had only done one breathwork session. You know, I was completely shocked. And this is a huge difference, and it's something that even my trainer and I continue to disagree on. it's created a kind of a rift, honestly. I don't feel like I'm really doing holotropic breathwork. You know, I'm not representing Grof's work anymore in my own retreats, in a sense, because of this step. It's a huge difference. And I'm happy to talk about it if other people can stay later on the presentation. This is how Moni described her experience graphically. It's just like you've got this energy flowing through you, and some of it's quite dark, you know, and she could do this. This is how we learned. I started facilitating, and she was breathing with the client, okay? I'll show you the client we were breathing with in a minute. Signs of a surrogate connection. The surrogate would have deep insights into major client's issues without prior knowledge. Shared or complementary physical sensations and movements during the session. Their eyes are closed, and yet they would be moving in the same way at the same time, synchronistically, okay? A strong sense that the experiences are not related to the life of the surrogate. It's like, this is not my energy, this is not my life experience, but to the client. And the client usually becomes very quiet and unexpressive while the surrogate is active. And then when the surrogate gets quiet, the client gets active. So there's this back and forth that goes on between the two of them that we've seen with another number of clients. There's the sense that the surrogate is working through very difficult material that the client is not prepared to face most of the time. And very strong emotional expressions can come up from the surrogate, such as screaming, crying, singing, growling, that the client usually doesn't express. And there's sometimes an immediate sensation of profound healing from the client after a surrogate session. They'll come off the mat and they'll be like, wow, like that was just much bigger compared to other sessions they've had. So this is a huge step, and I can see Graham is mesmerized by these slides. Okay, can you guess which mandala was drawn by the surrogate? You know, this gives you the idea. This mandala on the left was done by Kirsten in one of our sessions, and this one on the right was done by Moni while she was being the surrogate, I believe for Kirsten, but I might be wrong about that, I'm not sure. Okay. Now, and then another important benefit from this, along with really helping the client, was fewer periods of exhaustion for the facilitator, the surrogate, and other supporters. I felt so much better once Moni started breathing for the client. It was just like, whoo, a big weight had been lifted off my shoulder. I didn't need to stop our retreats to rest. We could just keep breathing, you know. And so here's some of the results, super fast, okay? We've done 49 retreats since 2013 with 34 clients. 12 have had 2 or more retreats, conducted in various countries, Mexico, Romania, Germany, Finland, Netherlands, Switzerland, Brazil, right? With those clients, oh, that's a repeat slide, sorry. 19 have had bipolar 1, that was a diagnosis. 2 depression, 4 schizoaffective, 1 schizophrenia, 1 OCD, 1 dissociation, 1 borderline, 2 undiagnosed, 3 for personal development, okay? So along with bipolar, we've been experimenting with a wide range of different sets of symptoms that people have been diagnosed for. You know. And then of the retreats, 9 days or more, 22 retreats, 6 to 8 days, 20, 7, 3 to 5 days. Feedback we've had. This is my own opinion, okay? It's not scientific. I think we've had 39 retreats that have gone pretty well, generally positive, and about 8 that I would call negative. And one thing that's interesting, 2 sort of neutral. The first thing is that some of the positive retreats, people came out of them feeling a little bit negative or disappointed or feeling they could have gotten more. And then we get feedback from them a year, or in one case, 2 years later, talking about how the retreat changed that person's life, broke their 20 years of depression, you know, which was really incredible to see this long-term feedback. And another interesting thing was 3 negatives were actually on their second retreat. So they had had positive retreats, but then they come back, and at least in 2 of the 3 cases, they maybe hit some negative material they were uncomfortable with, and then they went away feeling thrown or something, and we're still going to work on that, okay? Let's see. Of the 8 negatives, I would say 2 were paired retreats where I was trying to work with 2 people at once and it didn't work out. They also involved acts of God. Like in one case, we lost electricity in the breathwork sessions 2 days in a row, you know. OCD and dissociation and schizophrenia were part of 4 of the other negatives, okay? So people really outside the zone of people that I knew about that I was comfortable with working, okay, were part of the negatives. So it told me to stay in the zone. And one was a 20-year history who had already given me behavior that made me feel like it was a red flag. Maybe I shouldn't be working with this person, even before we started. So if anything, a lot of these negatives confirmed my own profile, the type of person I should be working with. The questionnaire was doing a good job in getting us the right kind of client for the work. And I had one client that didn't go well, went well the first time, not the second. And part of it was a personal issue between him and myself. You know, it was something I need to work on, personal work for myself, right? Right now, 8 clients are no longer using psychiatric medications to my knowledge. 6 of those had a second retreat. So it really showed me the value of people coming back and doing that second retreat, getting it under their belt, and then looking at reducing medications in a more drastic way after that. But of course, you know, it gets expensive. Others have reported general well-being, feeling more authentic, open, and alive, feeling more confident, less fearful, grounded and in the body. Long-held issues have been resolved, reporting on blocked abuse-related memories, and a wider, healthy, emotional spectrum in their lives, range and grounded life, okay? So a lot of good stuff has come out, even if people have stayed on meds. Some have reduced their meds. It's generally been a very positive thing. That's why I'm saying I've had like 38, 39 good retreats here. Okay, this box is driving me crazy. Nobody has entered into psychosis during the retreat, more than 250 breathwork sessions. Clients with bipolar have responded very well to the techniques, and psychiatrics appear to have had a negative impact, or not had a negative impact, okay? And to show we progressed, in the first retreat I did, we did 8 breathwork hours across 20 days. But with the surrogate work, we started to do like 42 breathwork hours in 7 days. 16 hours by the client, 14 by the surrogate, 6 in additional clear out hours for the surrogate where they're just sort of working on themselves, and 6 hours for me, a total of 42 hours in dedication to the client. So it was a very big improvement in how we were able to get work done. We were busy by the time we got to 2017. Got to close it, right? Joe, you're looking at this? Okay, some stories have gone public. This is Tim Nolte, okay? He's been on the radio, TV, and newspapers, and I think I'm running out of time. Moni is now a certified facilitator, and Kirsten, I'm so sorry that you're not gonna be able to say anything. Maybe we could regroup, and if anyone wants to talk to Kirsten about her experience or have more questions, we can do it in a second set, because I think we're about to go under, and I haven't even got a chance to get to the good stuff yet. Fuck. Joe, are we done?
Joe, do you want to summarize where we are now? And then someone can take on a different session. Would you unmute yourself?
Oh, hi there. Oh, I'll just... What was my question? Oh, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, all of it sounds incredible. Like, it sounds like you're taking the work of like the Soteria model, Groff's work, John Wick, and you're taking it to the next level and next progressive stage, and you're integrating that within in a holistic model, like in terms of clinical work in psychology and psychiatry, peer support movement, and the transpersonal perspective, and bringing it all together. And there's so much, like in terms of a new model, and there's research that's coming out of it as well as this model. It's like I can just see it's like overwhelming in terms of the creativity and innovation. It's so hard to contain everything in this brief presentation. And I think it sounds brilliant.
That's what's frustrating. I always need to start from the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's good though. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone who's interested who needs to go now, you can go to my website, bipolarawakenings.com. I am doing distance work now, and I'm doing work that people can help themselves online. So I'll be expanding on that. I'm going to expand on that in the second part of this presentation. But you can see some of the details on bipolarawakenings.com. And I don't know what everybody's looking at right now, whether it's my screen or what. I guess I need to stop
Yeah.
sharing.